Good afternoon, grown black folks talk. All right, today, boy, do we have a topic. Thank you, Mr. President. No, I haven't lost my mind, nor have I changed my basic position about President Trump. However, I was talking to a friend of mine, Stephen Woodford, about the state of black people in America, and I was going to do this anyhow, but then this morning I got up and found out that the Right Reverend Franklin Graham has come out and said that Donald Trump is going to be in office as long as God has a purpose for him being there. Now, I'm not here to argue with the Right Reverend Franklin Graham. One of the things we got to learn as black folks who are growing in age, growing in freedom, growing in maturity, we don't have to argue with everybody in the sense of becoming emotional and angry. We can actually go and reason, which was the old sense of arguing. You go and you take people's facts and you go reason and work with those facts. Well, Franklin Graham is a reverend. I'm just a Sunday school teacher. But you see, something has happened that a lot of elite white people back in the day never wanted to happen. I'm just a black woman, Sunday school teacher, but you know what? I got a Bible and I can read it. So when people who supposed to know the Bible tell me that something's supposed to be going on, I can check it for myself. May I suggest that to everybody out there? I'm just saying. Well, when Paula White, supposedly Pastor Wolf Paula White, came through here talking about we shouldn't criticize the president because he was chosen of God, I just took us back on into Exodus, where indeed it does say that God chose that particular Pharaoh. He said in chapter 9, verse 16, "And indeed for this very cause have I raised thee up, for to show in thee my power, and that my name may be declared throughout all the earth." So God chose this particular Pharaoh. But if you have not been to Sunday school recently, you might assume that God chose this particular Pharaoh, that he may do such deeds of good work that God would be glorified through the earth. If you have been to Sunday school in your lifetime, you already know the story of Moses and the 10 plagues. But let me break it down for us as grown black folks talk. I don't have time to go through it like I went through it from so-called Reverend Paula White, but I'm going to condense it for you. This is the Pharaoh who was in office when God decided to hold the greatest nation on earth at that time to account for its 400 years of, several hundred years. We don't know if they were enslaved the whole 400, but several hundred years of enslaving the Jewish people. Egypt had a multi-century slave problem. In Exodus, the early chapters, the father of this particular Pharaoh got so upset about the population that they were afraid the slaves was just going to become so many that they would overthrow them, that he decided to destroy all the boy babies of the Jewish people at that time. Side note, if you ever wonder why black boys are tracked into jail, and at least in California, and I know a law enforcement officer who confirmed it for me, he was at the meeting when they determined how many prison cells to build to put based on the number of black boys in 4th grade. If you ever wonder why plans are designed on your black sons and grandsons when they are just children so that they can never grow up to be free men, just understand you will commit genocide very easily if you destroy all the boys. Everything old is new again. But some of these babies in the Jewish race at this time survived. And one of them's name was Moses. And he comes back approximately 79 years later to tell the Pharaoh of Egypt, who's in chapter 9, let my people go. God has said to tell you to let my people come out of the slavery. And Pharaoh says no, whereby God then goes on in the next chapters to absolutely destroy the Egyptians' ability to enjoy the wealth that they have gotten through slavery, and also to destroy the Egyptian agricultural wealth, the cattle, most of the cattle and the crops to the ground. To the ground. If you read the effect of the plague on the cattle, the plague on the plague of hail and the plague of locusts, destroyed Egypt to the ground. But if that wasn't enough, Pharaoh's still like, I'm not letting him go. And God says, okay, I'm telling you one more last time. you're going to either let my people go or I'm going to kill every firstborn child in Egypt. Because God had not forgotten about what this man, the Pharaoh's father, had done to the Jewish people in destroying their boys. So God said, you're going to let my people go or I'm going to address that. Pharaoh says, I'm not doing it. Guess what? He changed his mind when his firstborn son and every firstborn son not protected by the blood of the Passover in Egypt died. God avenged his people. Oh, we didn't stop there, though. In Exodus chapter 11, he also told the children of Israel, I'm going to bring you out of here, but before you go, you make sure you go talk to the Egyptians about your back wages. You're going to get your reparations. I'm not making this up. You can find this in chapter 11 of Exodus, verses 1 and 2. And by the way, just so you know, in chapter 12, verses 35 and 36, the children of Israel went and asked the Egyptians for their stuff, and the Egyptians handed over anything they wanted. And so God brought his people out with reparations. So if you want to know the divine position on reparations for slavery, you'll find it in Exodus chapter 11 and chapter 12. Well, Pharaoh realized round about chapter 14 that we've let them leave here and they've taken all the slaves are gone, all the wealth is gone. What we gonna do? We're gonna go get them back. We're gonna get them back. Well, that's how Pharaoh and his army ended up at the bottom of the Red Sea by the end of chapter 14. Because God wasn't gonna have it. He had freed his people. He had had them repaid for their labor, and they were going to stay free. And that was how that was going to be. And God chose that particular Pharaoh in Egypt for God to show his power by freeing his people and punishing the country that had enslaved them. I didn't make that up. That's in Exodus chapter 1 through chapter 14. So, okay, maybe, like I said with Miss Paula White, maybe God did choose Donald Trump. But if he did, the United States of America has quite a long account running. May be in for a rough time because God does not always choose a leader in order the country achieve prosperity. Sometimes he has things he wants to account for. But I told you that the name of this is Thank You, Mr. President. So I'm going to go in a slightly different direction now. Maybe Franklin Graham is right for a second reason. I'm just looking up some scripture as we go here, so we'll have it ready. Maybe Franklin Graham is right for a second reason. There are reasons that as a grown black folk in this country, I actually have a certain amount of gratitude to Donald John Trump, President of the United States of America. 8 years ago, a bunch of people my age, especially, who are not old enough to really remember Jim Crow, were sitting around talking about, we have achieved a post-racial America. Not knowing that at the same time, the relatively young men who turned out in Charlottesville with their tiki torches, expressing their Nazism and their allegiance to that 152-year-old terrorist organization called the Ku Klux Klan, had grown up right beside us, and their parents and their grandparents and their great-grandparents had put that same hatred of us in them that their foreparents had had. Going back at least 152 years, maybe a little more. Actually, maybe a lot more. So we didn't know that was still going on. We never would have known if we had not had a president come into office with whom the white people that truly hate black people, Latino people, Jewish people, they covered all the ground in Charlottesville. And they're relatively young. We would not have known if they had not felt that the Justice Department wasn't going to bother them. And they could go and rally and even kill somebody the next day. We wouldn't have known. And so I remember that my sister called me in November, almost a year ago, and said, quote, if Hillary Clinton had been elected, we probably would have gone back to sleep. But Donald Trump was elected. And so I have no problem saying thank you, Mr. President, for not allowing black people to go back to sleep. Because we've learned that we have to pray up, learn up, steady up, build ourselves up, stand up, and even kneel up or kneel down for our rights. And we would not have known this. And in fact, the Bible talks about a situation where sometimes God leaves people around you to cause you to get to where you need to be. This is in Judges chapter 3, verses 1 and 2. Now, and the background is the Lord has brought his people into the promised land, but he left some people there, so they need to learn something. Chapter 3, verse 1. Now these are the nations which the Lord left to prove Israel by them, even as many of Israel as had not known all the wars of Canaan. Only, this is the only reason, that the generations of the children of Israel might know, to teach them war, at the least such as before knew nothing thereof. Here's the thing, black folks. Freedom isn't free. We hear that cliche, but it's something that has to be fought for from generation to generation. Like I've said on here before. Even at the end of chattel slavery, Abraham Lincoln, the so-called great emancipator, who did get the Emancipation Proclamation and did commit 380,000 troops died, including 66 to 70,000 black troops, to obtain our freedom. This man was married to a slave owner's daughter named Mary. She was named Mary Todd, and Mr. Todd was a slave owner. And Abraham Lincoln gave, shall we say, a little love offering to the white slave owners that he had just defeated. He left a back door into slavery. 13th Amendment in the first part says slavery is abolished throughout all the United States territory, and the United States and its territories. In the black half it says except for felony imprisonment. So basically this means that enough white people can make laws to make black people, whatever it is they choose to do, a felony, or to find ways to maneuver them into situations where they're likely to commit certain felonies, then it is easy to take black people as a unit and put them right back into slavery through the prison system. This has been on the books since December the 6th, 1865. And in fact, in 1865, the first vagrancy to work programs were put together, whereby if you were a black person who did not have a job or a place to live and were just walking around trying to find a job and a place to stay, you could be put into jail and put right back to work. This began before Reconstruction, before the Southern Confederates, former Confederates, and old landowners took over all the governments again in the South. So from the very beginning, the move to put us back as close to slavery as we could go started in 1865, not even in 1877 at the end of Reconstruction. And if you consider that it was Abraham Lincoln that started it, that's the United States government that started that. Now, Abraham Lincoln didn't live to see it ratified, but he is the person that had that put in place. So we've been asleep about what's really going on for a long time. And if President Donald Trump hadn't come into office, we probably would have stayed asleep. It would not have taken a Donald Trump to slowly keep this going. Any Republican, or for that matter, most Democrats, could go into office and keep us moving back toward not being free in this country. But instead, we have been given a president that, I'm going to say it again, that has caused us to have to pray up, learn up, study up, build up, speak up, stand up, and kneel down for our rights in this country. And for that I say, thank you, Mr. President. It's probably not what you intended, but thank you very much. Because it is our responsibility as free black people to continue to work for the freedoms that we have. Nothing was ever handed us here but captivity, whips, chains, and misery. That's what was handed to us upon coming to our ancestors upon coming to America. That's what was given us in this country. Everything else we've got to work for. And so President Donald Trump has panicked us enough so that more and more of us are coming to realize it. And so maybe Reverend Graham is right after all. Have a good afternoon. Bye.